So, The Medium. I'll be honest, this game was recommended to me by a person who did not like it. They played it through themselves, found the ending to be disconcerting, told me it handled pedophiles badly, and thought maybe I'd like to give it the Rachel Foster treatment. I would. I said. I would love to give it the Rachel Foster treatment. Like the catharsis of hitting a punching bag or putting your brother in a pillowcase and throwing him into the River Thames, I knew I was due a nice massage for the mind, a bit of TLC. However, The Medium surprised me. Why? Because it actually really disappointed me. The Medium is really good, or it would be, at least I think so, if not for the final few minutes. It's strange. I would say the first 60% of this game is actually masterfully done. The final 35% is a toe-dragging slog. The last 5% dumpster fire. And it's weird. Usually I would say, well, if only a little bit of it is bad. You can ignore that and just focus on the rest, but oddly, not with this game. Like a stunned parent at the nativity who just watched their 6-year-old poo in their sheep costume on the stage, wondering whether to skip out of the fire exit, I saw something I kind of loved basically soil itself in front of me. I do genuinely think that the final scene of this game is irredeemable enough that any future playthroughs would be tainted by it. It's fairly unignorable. Definitely an unhinged ending with the strangest message I've ever seen. Because I do think that merely explaining what happens at the end of this game will probably not do the real issue of it justice. There's context, like with most things, and a kind of drip-fed message across the entire game, culminating in this one final splat. So I will do what I've done before. I'll explain the game to you, we can talk about what it does well, what it does badly, you know, the classic actual review, and then we'll cover the bit where it all goes wrong. But unlike my other reviews, I also want to talk about Silent Hill 2. There's a few reasons why I want to talk about Silent Hill 2. Firstly, I think that the Silent Hill series was clearly the inspiration for The Medium. Both games center around being summoned to a location to face your past in a horrifying monstrous form, unlocking old memories and coming to terms with who you are and why you are who you are. It's a puzzle-heavy game featuring an otherworld mechanic, albeit with some differences, and a terrifying unkillable evil that lurks around every corner. But the reason why I want to look at Silent Hill 2 specifically? Because Bloober, the developers of The Medium, are rumoured to have been given the Atlas task of remaking Silent Hill 2, and since we don't know whether it's just a shot-for-shot remake or they'll get some of their own creative license, we can measure and compare their ability to handle that kind of content as we discuss the game. Even if they end up not making it, there are some good parallels to make, so let's get started. So yeah, not only will we be reviewing The Medium, but we'll be analysing what I thought went wrong with it and talking about Silent Hill. So if you're one of those strange folk who come into my videos, the literal video essays I write, to comment that I'm talking about the game too much and not just playing it, your mum's called. She says turn off the iPad and go and get your dinner. With that said, full spoilers ahead for The Medium. Bloober's the Blair Witch game and Silent Hill 2, and light spoilers for the rest of the Silent Hill series as a whole. Proceed with caution. Now, if you liked the video, please like, subscribe, and comment your own thoughts on The Medium. I enjoyed quite a good portion of this game, but goddamn that ending. I'd like to know how you guys found it, what you would have done differently, whether you were bothered at all or interpreted the ending any differently than I did. And thank you to my patrons for their support. Many of my more popular videos get demonetized because of the stuff I discuss, so really appreciate it. Feel free to go sub to my Patreon if you want to see updates on my work, vote, and have a say on what I make, and support my future endeavors. The cheapest tier is $3 a month, so you know, it's there. Finally, I present to you I'm Not Mad, Just Disappointed, a review of The Medium, and content warning ahead for discussions of suicide, self-harm, sexual assault, paedophilia, and PTSD. The game also includes fairly explicit audio of rape, because of course it does, but I won't be playing it. I will describe it when the time comes though. The Medium, very promisingly, starts with a content warning, and it's my favourite kind of content warning too. It's purposefully vague, not explaining the content you'll actually see and therefore need to be warned about, likely for the sake of preserving spoilers, but at the cost of not really providing a content warning at all. It's like those food wrappers that say food may contain nuts, like, does it or does it not? Because it is fairly important, you may as well just not have said anything. But moreover, I love the way this content warning is worded. The warning says, essentially, we'll be touching on sensitive subjects with the intention of treating them well, which basically translates to, we'll do our best, but if we fuck up, we fuck up. I'm not even shitting on them for this either, it's fantastically worded, like they got the legal department in to make sure they weren't going to say anything they'd be held accountable for later. Considering the whopping content warning I gave in the introduction to this this video, their efforts are pretty laughable. It reminds me of the content warning at the beginning of Silent Hill 3, which simply says, this game contains images that some may consider to be violent or cruel. Like, either have a comprehensive one or don't, Bloober, don't half-arse it. The game begins. We see a woman running through the forest in a white dress, kind of like an old nurse's outfit. She reaches the end of a pier, standing at the foot of a huge lake. Cornered by whatever she was running from, she turns around. The woman stares at this person in terror. They raise a gun to her face and they shoot. Our scene changes now. We see a goblet of fire opening with a whistling kettle. Our protagonist, a young woman with smoky eyes and a dark ponytail, recounts the dream to us that we just watched. She makes 2 drinks and puts them on the table, one for herself and one for her listener. A party we can't see due to the framing of the shot, and with dirty hands and face, she takes a welcome drag of a cigarette. She starts telling us about the hardest day of her life, saying goodbye to her father, getting him ready for his own funeral. We wander around his apartment at a Lee from The Walking Dead walking speed and eventually blunder into a photo development minigame, oh gosh, and develop a photo of Jack. He's basically the spitting image of Hitman from the game series Hitman, starring Hitman. Marianne, as we learn our main character is named, wistfully remembers him. She comments that the 2 of them lived upstairs from Jack's funeral home and that it was a good place for her to learn how to use her powers. As her foster parent, Jack taught her to accept her condition and treat it as a gift. Apparently, when Marianne was a little girl, she'd take messages from the deceased relatives of her schoolmates and relay them, which is pretty awesome all things considered, but apparently she was almost expelled for it. When we enter said funeral home, we go to the morgue, find Jack's drawer and slide it open. The man staring back at us is absolutely Jeff Bezos. Imagine if they got him in as a mocap actor just to give him something to do. As Marianne is preparing Jack for the funeral, the lights start to flicker. We go to check upstairs. Shadows appear and disappear in the flickering light as we walk up, creating this brilliantly tense atmosphere. Doors open and shut, the cat goes running, and a vase falls to the floor. As Marianne reaches out, we suddenly skip to a different reality of dust and bones. In this reality, Marianne has white hair, which would explain why some Gerard Way lookalike is on the front cover of this game. This world looks awesome, but not necessarily in a good way, like the old medieval way where things were awesome and terrifying, like the true forms of Old Testament angels, or those infographic diagrams of how much bacteria is on your toilet seat. It's a huge dusty expanse with these big formations of rock and weird webbed scaffolding reaching far out of sight. Strange roots crawl all over the place and noise echoes like you're in a big empty hall. It's Jack. He's confused and he's calling out to you for help. Jack's wearing a really strange mask, likely a death mask, but underneath it we can see a huge wound on his head. It's implied he died from a chronic illness, but it's never confirmed. Is that wound there in real life, if you catch my drift? It looks like a gunshot. Is it implying he was shot, or is it just for an eerie effect? I know that morticians use a weird putty to fill holes and wounds in corpses so that it just looks like normal, smooth surface skin. Could the Jack in the drawer be 20% Play-Doh? This cutscene is quite remarkable in that the only structure shared between the 2 worlds is the table Jack is standing at. Everything else is a huge expanse, massively dissimilar from the room Marianne is actually in. As we play the game, the areas we reach will be more or less shot-for-shot remakes of one another, but that's presumably for gameplay purposes. For now, it looks incredible. Jack's looking for his notebook. He's wondering why it's so cold, and he's scared about some surgery he'll be getting. Looks like he's not quite sure where he is, but it seems to be a kind of limbo. Marianne hugs him, promising it'll be okay, and convinces him to get some rest. When he finally agrees, it triggers a strange change in him. He begins to hemorrhage some white confetti and vanishes in a flash of light. He's moved on. The phone rings. Marianne picks it up. It's a man called Thomas who claims that he knows her, knows who she is, knows what power she has, and that he needs her help. She's initially skeptical and tries to get him off the phone, but stops when he promises her answers. The prologue ends and the opening credits roll. It's a very jarring montage of flickering black and white footage, all stiff and twitchy and erratic, of what I can only assume is a Visit Poland advert. All pigeons and weird kids and needles, because yes, it is important to mention this game is set in Poland and touches upon a lot of post-World War II history throughout its runtime. Marianne drives to the location on a motorcycle. The place is called Niwa, and as we explore, finally allowed to run, we learn it is an overgrown, government-run vacation resort. Marianne comments on an old urban legend about the place, that it was shut down because of some Niwa massacre, and after seeing a spooky ball roll our way, we decide to follow some ghostly footprints and the eerie sound of laughter. Marianne spent her whole life with ghosts, so this doesn't bother her at all. She has no issue walking towards supernatural occurrences because she'll just help them pass on, then go about her day. So we've already got our Silent Hill 2 parallels coming to fruition. As Marianne has been called to this resort seemingly by a ghost of someone she knows, or she feels she knows, James Sunderland, our blonde protagonist, was called to Silent Hill by his late wife. 2 protagonists are called to face their past and get answers by 2 people who are, as far as they know, not alive. Both journeys led them to dilapidated old vacation resorts, but once they arrive, they're not exactly sure what they need to be looking looking for. As we explore, we encounter a fort with 2 archway entrances, and some of the mechanics of the game begin to flesh themselves out. Marianne has this weird twitchy migraine, and when it passes, the world splits in 2, at least on our screen. We get that classic co-op split screen appearance, but we control both characters at the same time. This is basically how the gameplay functions. Puzzles are based in 2 dimensions that Marianne remarks she exists in simultaneously but lives in neither. Very edgy. What's present in one world might present differently in the other or be completely absent. This works similarly to the other world in the Silent Hill series, except it's left much more in the air whether the protagonists of that series are phasing between realities or present in all of them at once. Particularly in Silent Hill 3, where Vincent, a character voiced by Peter Parker in the HD collection, comments,
"Monsters? They look like monsters to you?"
and Heather does this like hilarious melodramatic gasp. Still, functionally, I like this concept a lot, this split reality. It really worked for me. We find a strange font of energy that's implied to be the remainder of a soul, a memory, or just physical human remains. Marianne remarks on who it might have been, a soldier missed by his beloved, or someone who's just happy to be done with it all. We eventually reach Niwa, this enormous towering hotel crumbling at the seams. It's a really striking visual, and as we approach, we learn that we can examine items to see fragments of the past. This is largely how the game gives us our exposition, at first at least. After a while, this game will get ahead of itself and just have the characters monologue exposition at us, but for now, however, we have some subtlety. This game reeks of Resident Evil and Silent Hill inspiration with, amongst many other things, lots of fixed camera angles. Especially at the beginning of the game, these fixed camera angles are created with a lot of care, and they frame some very impressive and well-considered shots. I'm glad it used this method of traversal. It means every shot can be as well planned as a comic book frame or a movie shot. Everything can look good. This game makes very solid use of the PS5 controller's inbuilt microphone and haptics. The echoes speak out of the microphone, and they do echo too, which, combined with the controller's okay audio level, does actually create something that works. Although beware if you have kids sleeping in the next room and the wife's asked you to turn the volume down, because you will have some very awake children once this goes off. We enter the hotel and find a shoe on the ground, which, when examined, shows us an echo of the past. We hear screaming and running, and we see clothes covered in blood. Looks like the Niwa massacre was a real thing, and no one bothered to come and clean up all the stuff here. Marianne starts shouting for Thomas, only for the lights to flicker erratically. She panics, reminding herself that she probably shouldn't just be walking onto the site of a massacre and screaming the place down. The reception bell starts to ding, and, I'm trying to explore and get a handle on this cavernous building, and it doesn't fucking stop, so I stomped over to see what was going on. The ball reappears, rolling down the stairs, and the world swaps again. There's a little ghost girl here with pigtails and one arm and the classic death mask. The ghosts in this game look absolutely incredible. Like, the outer shell is human, you can see that, but under the skin it's just weird rust framing and like red webbing. Like their bodies are entirely hollow. From the way she's crumbled away, I feel like it's implied that the ghosts fall apart the longer they're in limbo, as their individual components rust away. Potentially why she's lost her arm and so much of her body is corroded. This theory is compounded by the name she gives us when Marianne asks. She introduces herself as Sadness, saying it's the only thing she remembers. A bit edgy, Bloober, a bit on the nose, but I'll allow it. Sadness looks fantastic design-wise, an incredible spin on the concept of ghosts. I was actually blown away, particularly with how her acting is so childlike and innocent. She tells us to go upstairs with her and runs up the stairs, but we can't follow her. Although our spirit side can, our human side can't. So we need to find another way up. This will often form the main reason for any puzzles that we need to do. God knows how Marianne goes anywhere in real life. Both her human and otherworld body need to be able to traverse the same things, and often in limbo, stairs have crumbled or floors have straight up fallen away, meaning that she has to use these really roundabout ways to get anywhere. Sure, most of the time she's not split between worlds, but like with Silent Hill, she doesn't have a choice on when it happens, and it could probably happen at any moment. The visuals really are the strongest part of this game, honestly. My opinion on that will change as we move through chapters, but for now, it's an utterly beautiful game. The limbo world in this is such a fantastic spin on the concept of limbo. It's not dark, it's very bright, but it's like a post-nuclear wasteland from far into the distant future, full of swirling dust and eroded buildings. I love it. One of the other things about this game I applaud is its restraint. This isn't a jump scare filled sting noise bonanza with stuff falling off the walls and loud bangs whenever you take 2 steps. This game cultivates creepy, eerie atmosphere atmosphere and maintains that atmosphere really well, particularly since the Bloober team also developed Layers of Fear, which was a massive haunted house experience of back-to-back jump scares. This game is far more restrained, except for one particular moment which I absolutely didn't see coming, and promise I will not be showing you here because I hate jump scares, where such a perfectly crafted jump scare made me yelp so loud that I had to take a break. Just one though, in the whole game. That's restraint. This section of the game doesn't just introduce heart palpitations, however. It also introduces the out-of-body experience mechanic. Your character focuses and separates the immediate link between their halves, allowing their spirit half to freely traverse limbo while their real half stands still and slumped. This allows you to go places that are blocked off from your real-world counterpart and solve puzzles in new areas. It also introduces the spirit shield, where your character can use a temporary shield to walk through areas that would be impassable otherwise, usually because they're flooded with swarms of spirit-devouring insects. However, this serves more as a glorified fetch quest. You have to go and find one of those spirit fonts, then come back and use the energy to make a shield to walk to the next section. We're also introduced to, like, skin doors. They're hard to describe, like huge hunks of lumpy flesh that cover doors and windows. We need to find a razor blade in a suicide bath, because there's always a suicide bath, and use it to carve these doors now and from now on. I guess it gives the game a chance to load what's on the other side, but goddamn, it's very sensual cutting. At collecting the razor blade, Marianne comments that she's considered suicide herself before, but knowing what limbo looks like and knowing that she might just end up stuck there forever, she could never bring herself to even try. Interesting overshare there, Marianne. Thanks for that detail. This section of the game also gives us an insight into the Niwa massacre. We see flashbacks to a nurse, Nurse Ursula, who seems pretty nice all things considered. However, there's more to her. We find a note in the sink which states Ursula was diagnosed with malnutrition, depression, insomnia, and hysteria, and, amongst various prescriptions, was given electroshock therapy. Ursula was also completely infatuated with a man called Richard, a man who rejected her by letter, very brave Richard, who we'll learn more about later. Unfortunately, however, we walk into the next room and see an echo of the past, as she snaps and stabs him to death, or seems to. We'll cover that later. After a long crawl through the hotel, we finally reunite with Sadness, who's really pissed off that we just disappeared without warning, but quickly calms down and is her normal giggly self after we reassure her. A note in Marianne's apartment mentioned that she often volunteered at the orphanage she grew up in, so she's very naturally good with kids. I like that. She's a very steely woman in many ways, quite a stereotypical female video game protagonist, quite brisk and dry and cold, but she's really sweet with Sadness, and she knows how to act with her, make her happy, and get the information she needs whilst also respecting Sadness's privacy. We go to open a door and Sadness suddenly panics. She can tell that something's wrong, but she can't quite put her finger on it.
Marianne! I feel... I don't think we should be here.
It's okay, Sadness. Look, there's no one here. Sadness?
Marianne reassures her that it's fine, opens the door, and Sadness vanishes without a word. You get a bad feeling about it. It's a well done scene, and you do feel a little edge of panic as she goes. Well done, Bloober. It's Thomas's office, the guy from the phone. There's a note he's written saying something is creeping in, but he won't let it, even if he has to kill himself to stop it. We find a photograph taken of Marianne here too. Upon picking this up, a projector jumps to life behind us, flicking through the photographs. Marianne walks towards it, in turn stepping into a strange ritual circle on the floor, and suddenly we see a strange winged creature behind us, definitely a demonic entity. It's crying and begging us not to look at it in this strange voice that sounds like him from the Powerpuff Girls.
Hello? Are you alright?
Don't look at me!
We disobey, and suddenly he snaps around saying he wants to try us on and grabs us. We escape and run away, and he follows. The escape becomes a stealth segment where he roams, destroying bits and pieces of furniture as he searches for us.
Inside and out. Won't you be my friend?
You can creep through, or you can honestly just pelt past him because its AI is so slow to register that you're there that you can usually quite easily get to where you need to be before his startled animation actually ends. He's voiced by Troy Baker too, and once you hear it, you never stop noticing it. One of the worst parts of these stealth segments is weirdly the filter on the game itself. The game has like adaptive lighting, and it gets lighter or darker depending on where you are, so sometimes whatever's on screen will just randomly go completely black or completely white, meaning it becomes really hard to even vaguely discern where you're going. You could argue that this was intended to add a bit of difficulty, but due to the sporadicness of it and its randomness overall, I honestly believe that any gameplay enhancement was purely coincidental. The monster and its design, however, are not coincidental. In a way I'll describe to you later in more depth, the creature here is a manifestation of something someone is dealing with, or was dealing with. There are a few instances of this as we play, and I'll promise I'll explain them when they're relevant, but for now, we're again seeing parallels to Silent Hill. The evils here are man-made in the most dark fantasy way possible, manifestations of a person's deepest psyche. We transition back to the one-sided conversation scene from the start of the game. Remember the one with the silent and invisible second party? Marianne ponders about how this thing, its name is Moore, so that's what we'll call it, is nothing she's ever seen. Marianne wonders aloud who Thomas is and what he wants. After the chase scene, Marianne falls, and she wakes up on the floor of the hotel by the reception desk with the nearby radio forming the words, "Happy you're okay." It's Sadness. She's not dead, or deader. She's still here, and she tells us to find Richard in the day room. However, we need a pair of bolt cutters to access the day room. As we continue through the hotel, we find more echoes of the past. During an interrogation, agents investigating the Niwa massacre were told that the nurse went mental and killed everyone. But, they say, they want this investigation out of the way, and stories like this are only going to escalate it further and get more attention. So they wrap it up fast and bury the truth. Marianne comments on this, saying that sometimes things stick and they echo, they don't go away. We find little cat figurines that we can use on mirrors to cross to the limbo world. We do so and find a weird husk all chained up in the wall. It's a little boy called Bernard. We find his face, his death mask, and return it to him, allowing him to pass into the afterlife. This is a really cool gimmick, and it's only used about 3 times in this game in a fairly short amount of time, which is a shame. I'd have liked to see it more and variations on the formula too. A name is more than just what everyone calls you, it's what you feel yourself to be, Marianne comments cryptically. I always just thought a name was a noise you would use to identify yourself, but this was kind of a sweet message, so I'll let it slide. We have another short chase sequence with Moore and more stealth, which, can I just say, gets very boring the 3rd session onwards, and just serves to grind the story and gameplay to a halt, being that it's very easy but very slow. We continue on, finding a note written by the nurse that snapped and went nuts. Luckily, she's pre-nuts in this correspondence, obviously, complaining that she needs to babysit a child while doing her actual medical duties. You know, that's a grievance I can kind of get behind. I'm sure there's someone else with less important responsibility in that hotel that could look after a young kid. She says she can hear the child having full conversations with others as though somebody is there, and that she's gifted. Is the child us? We find a wheelchair soaked in blood, and using the echoes of the past, we hear the nurse stab whoever sat in it to death. Marianne says, the nurse. It got to her first, but why? I don't think this is actually a question the game ever answers, to be honest. The demon could have possessed anyone. Putting so much effort into characterizing the nurse was a bit unusual considering she was fairly interchangeable. If there was something I missed here, feel free to let me know. Marianne said she'd never felt darkness like that before, and it was when the thing got its first kill. We grab the pair of bolt cutters after what feels like an eternity, and we finally have entrance to the day room. God, is that really what we spent the last few hours doing? I mean, I cut a lot of the content out when I was describing it, but it's definitely like a quarter of the game. The previous segment goes so long that you genuinely forget what you're looking for. We enter the day room and encounter Sadness again. Marianne rolls her the ball, and the two of them play and chat. The split screen effect really works well here. Marianne is just chilling with a floating ball in the real world, but Sadness is bouncing it in limbo. Sadness recounts that something bad happened to Richard. He's not the same anymore, hollow and empty like a puppet. We ask to see him, and Sadness suddenly has a change of countenance. She says she doesn't want to see him anymore. Something happened to him. Sadness runs off, and Marianne is visibly worried for her. I have to admit, I initially found Sadness somewhere between creepy and annoying. Probably the universal experience of any parent, but she grew on me, just like I could see her growing on Marianne. Sadness has that kind of childish, erratic attitude. Her opinion can be harsh on a whim, she randomly gets frustrated, and then she'll just calm down again immediately and forget what the problem was. Initially, I took a big emotional step back from her, but as the game wore on, I actually found myself giving a real shit about Sadness. Considering kids in horror media often get characterized somewhere between living battery and creepy oracle, Sadness ended up being a fairly faithful representation of what it's like to be a lonely young teenage girl. We hear another echo with a girl called Lillian, Sadness's voice, and it seems that she's a medium as well. At long last, we we encounter Richard, or we kind of do. Richard is wheelchair bound, and as the nurse remarks, it's like he's somewhere else, completely catatonic and unresponsive. He's also voiced by the fellow who voices Vesemir in The Witcher 3, fun fact, but it will become weird as time goes on. You see, we look back at a moment in time and find Thomas standing over Richard, who is lying unresponsive on the floor. Thomas has called the doctor, saying he doesn't know what's happened or how it's happened, but Marianne can tell that Thomas thought Richard deserved it, whatever it was that happened to him. We will have it explained to us later. As we carry on through the level, we can see this enormous hand through the green-stained windows of the day room. In the distance, it's really eerie, all this grabby reaching hand symbolism, all these feeling hands waving around. I wonder what it could be alluding to. We see another glimpse into the past now. Liliane, or Lily, as we'll probably refer to her from now on, is being painted by Richard. Richard tells her that she reminds him of a girl he knew when he was young. Lily says, "Did you love her?" And he responds affirmatively. Marianne comments that he gives her a weird vibe. I hear you, girl. Me too. There's another glimpse. Richard buys Lily a ribbon and offers to put it on her. She says yes, but he suddenly stutters and suggests that she puts it on herself. Marianne remarks that she could sense something stirring inside him, like a boner, Marianne. Just say it. Another glimpse into the past. Richard is on his knees, screaming, "What have I done?" And Marianne observes that it feels cold. What have you done, Richard? As the final glimpse ends, a wheelchair rolls over to us. Marianne can sense desperation from it, so she decides to sit in it. The scene changes. Suddenly we're just some bloke with neat hair and a mustache. He's searching for something desperately, knocking stuff off the sides and looting drawers. He looks at his pocket watch and remarks that it's all falling apart, and he's talking to somebody we can't see or hear. He looks in the mirror and there's a version of him that talks back.
Look who finally decided to let me out of my cage. And only when you need my help. Surprise. Surprise.
Clearly an independent version of him, this version of the man is, for some reason, somebody he tries not to let out very often. He has information for Real Man, but he won't tell him because he just doesn't like him, which for a MacGuffin is pretty fun. He has information, but he just doesn't want to share it. Eventually, Real Man finds a book behind a painting, tucked into a nook in the wall. It's full of page after page after page of drawings of her. We soon find out that her is Lily, and that Richard has been drawing her in ways that this new man finds utterly horrifying, so I'm sure we can put the pieces together. What have I done, he grieves, somehow blaming himself for this, and the guy in the mirror reassures him, we couldn't have known. I like that, arsehole through and through, but serious when the issue of children is afoot. Our boy, who we realise is Thomas, wants to beat the shit out of Richard, but Mirror Thomas makes him promise not to. We switch now, we're playing as Richard in first person. We never actually see what he looks like as an adult, and he walks into the room and meets a furious Thomas. We learn Lily is Thomas's 13-year-old daughter, and Richard has a sketchbook full of pictures of Lily that make her father very angry, and Thomas is utterly bloodthirsty. Richard flounders, saying, "It wasn't me, Thomas, you have to understand. There's a thing inside me, believe me, I wanted to die." And Thomas just beats the shit out of him. After knocking Richard to the floor, Thomas grabs him by the face and shouts, "Let me in." The screen cuts to black. We wake up in a new dimension. Not limbo, but something else, like a weird green hell with slithering wet tentacles writhing on the floor and poisonous air. Floating hands on tendril arms all over the sky, wrapped around buildings and geography like vines. Thomas walks into frame looking like the Doomslayer, and he says something about a cancer having spread. This is Richard's mind, and this is our Chris Redfield segment. Thomas channels Chrissy Boy too. There's actually light combat here. While Marianne's medium abilities are all about helping people pass on and find closure and channeling memories of those who've died, Thomas's abilities thrive on hate. He uses the energy of negative emotions to charge blasts, and he has a force field that can counterattack when activated just before an attack lands. We enter a house where it originated. Thomas observes that the place reeks of loss, hatred, and grief, and that something happened here that changed Richard forever. The game was fairly subtle before. Not insanely subtle, but now we're getting exposition in droves. We explore the house and learn that Richard and his father had a very close relationship, but Richard's dad went off to the war and died. Damn, sad times. We enter a painting and hear a little girl shouting to Richard, calling him a slowpoke. Richard runs to the sound of her voice. He's bought her a little bit of food, some bread and milk, and she's very grateful. Her name is Rose, get it? Like the flower? Like Lily? Wow, what a coincidence. Yeah, this is the girl Richard was talking about before. We continue on. With the death of Richard's dad, Richard's mum needs to invite a new man into the house to take care of the family. Presumably they're running out of money, and this is pre-women in the workplace era, so she has to settle for whatever if it means she can keep her children fed. The new guy is a villain. He has an evil voice. He shouts shouts at Richard and threatens him. When Richard fights back, the guy furiously sends him away. Richard cries in bed. We hear, loudly and in great detail, Richard's mum getting raped. There's no warning either, neither here nor in the content warning at the beginning of the game, and it goes on for a really long time. It's like a full minute. I understand that some things are supposed to be shocking, but goddamn, like, sometimes you have to forego accidentally spoiling your audience if it means you're going to blast rape audio down their ears while her crying children scramble about in terror. We go back to the garden where Rose is. Richard refuses to open up to her about what's going on. He's not bought her much food either. She says it's okay. We see a little envelope on the floor with a partially sealed Star of David in it. And this is World War II, so we can assume she's Jewish and evading Nazi persecution, either at the house with Richard or nearby, somewhere local, so the two can play with each other. She pushes too far, asking if Richard is okay again, and he snaps at her. Thomas says, "Okay, Richard, I get the picture, it doesn't change a goddamn thing." We return and Richard's mum has called the Nazis on them. Although, as we learn, she agreed to house the Jewish refugees in the house under the floorboards, she needs to get the new stepfather out by any means necessary. As a result, she rats on the Jewish refugees she took in the first place and blames the father. He is hung as a collaborator, but oh no, the entire family was executed, and Rose is found in the garden and shot to death. There's even a dead rose bush there to symbolise it. Profound. We carry on and find an enormous multi-armed monster in the distance, and at our feet, a bed of dead lilies. The monster is the cancer that Thomas speaks of, probably symbolised by the sheer mass of it. It's this absolutely enormous, obese mass of flesh with a head and lots of grabbing hands. At its feet, we find Richard as a child, bound and confused. He begs for help, but Thomas is unsympathetic. Thomas puts a hand on Richard's head and the screen flashes white. We return to Marianne now, and the big multi-armed creature is talking to us. This is the Childeater. The Childeater comments that we smell just like Lily, and he says, "She came to me because she had nowhere else to go. Where was her father, and where were you? She was the light of my life and the warmth of my soul." Marianne, quite rightly, tells him to fuck off. She asks about Thomas, and the Childeater says that Thomas has the power to kill the soul. From context, we can glean that he's able to enter people's minds via physical touch, find their soul, manifesting as their inner child, and kill it. This completely destroys the mind, making the physical person catatonic and almost entirely unresponsive in real life. Richard asks if Lily will ever forgive him, and he begs Marianne to kill him. Marianne obliges. We suddenly appear in a dark forest out the back of Niwa. A postcard on the floor recounts Lily's 16th birthday. Alas, she was unable to have a proper birthday because of her sickness, causing her to waste away. We walk on again and find another postcard, which comments that it's getting harder and harder to ignore it. She's a girl locked up like an animal. Is she really that sick? We walk on and it begins to rain. There's a deer on the floor, a corpse that looks like it's rotted from the inside. Not soon thereafter, we find a dog who leads us to a campsite. Clothes are hanging up, left out to dry. There's stuff all over the campsite that likely would have been blown away by bad weather, so we can assume it's been used fairly recently. And finally, there's a tent. We hear a voice from the tent.
Is someone in there?
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Hello?
I wish I could see you again. I miss you so much. Why did I stay? Why did I let it out? They're all dead. Because of me. And I'm still here. I shouldn't be.
Hey. You alright in there?
You shouldn't be here. I can see you. And that means it can see you too.
Oh, of course. What else did you expect, Marianne?
The voice tells us that we shouldn't be here. Besides, he can see us, which means that it can see us too. We open the tent and a terrible smell hits us. There's nothing but a corpse in here, a man with a plastic bag wrapped tightly over his face. Like the deer, he looks rotted from the inside, with these weird, gross black veins on the back of his hands. Ma arrives, walking through the forest. He taunts us, telling us that he wore the man in the tent, but then outgrew him, wore him out. Nothing fits except you. Marianne smacks Ma with a stick and runs away. This scene is great. The music is chilling and intense, somehow both at the same time. You flash between our world and Limbo, watching the planet waste away as you sprint for your life, all from Moore's point of view. I was really impressed by the visuals of this scene, even if the gameplay is quite simple. We escape and find a ruin when suddenly we hear Jack's voice, our foster father who died at the start of the game, who we helped pass on. He cries out that Marianne promised and asks where she sent him, why she'd send him somewhere so horrible. Marianne's really confused. She's like, I helped you pass on, she says. I love this implication, this sudden panic that there might be something worse waiting for these spirits after Limbo. Like this cold, dusty, empty desert might not be the worst thing waiting for you after you die. All those times she thought she was doing these spirits a favour, and it actually turns out she was potentially sending them somewhere even worse. But it's not Jack, thankfully, it's Moore pretending to be Jack, and he runs at us. We sprint away again in a desperate struggle, like a visual metaphor for trying to escape Troy Baker as a casting director. At this point I ran through a gap and Moore began smashing at it, trying to break through. There was something next to it that I could shunt in the way, but the angles were so finicky that I died just trying to grab it, and then I couldn't even get it to work in time. I tried again and I died again, and the run-up was getting on my nerves, so this time I ran through the gap and kept running, quickly using the bolt cutters to open a nearby door, and then I sprinted up the stairs as fast as I could. I was halfway up the stairs when Moore crashed through the gap in the wall several meters behind me, and I was instantly pulled into a death animation. The game hadn't accounted for me running away in time, so I was just abruptly and basically killed out of nowhere. I reloaded a few more times until I managed to drag the object so that the gap was blocked. Moore gave up, perhaps a bit weak of him, come on man, and I moved on. I found a generator that didn't work. Okay, I thought, and took a few steps to the left. There was a jerry can on the floor. I picked it up. This can't possibly have gas in it, I thought, and I used it on the generator. It did have gas in it. Sure, I still needed to grab a lever after a short walking section with absolutely zero risk, but this is definitely the point in the game where the puzzles become startlingly two-dimensional. As if to illustrate my point, I walked on and found a fence with a chain on it, but I have bolt cutters. So I used the bolt cutters on the door, saw the door opening animation, and walked through it. It's the same for the flesh walls in Limbo. This game starts to employ a lot of these locked doors back to back, requiring you to click them, use the item in your inventory, and basically take like 10 seconds to open the door instead of 1 second. This isn't like Resident Evil games, for example 8, where you find the courtyard key for access to the courtyard, then in the courtyard you find the wing, you can grab the Dimitrescu key for access to the private wings, and then from the private wings you can grab the iron key, allowing you to comb the same space 3 times over, finding bigger dimensions to explore each go around. This game is extremely linear. It's completely linear. The door opening puzzles almost pointless in their execution, beyond wasting your time so later sections can load. You may as well just have the classic Last of Us 2 squeezy gaps, or the Final Fantasy VII super heavy doors that take like 10 seconds to open. After a section I will generously describe as a puzzle section, we find Sadness again. She's swinging on a little swing. Marianne is really sweet and gentle, but prompts Sadness to search her memory, asking her about Richard. Sadness visibly recoils. We call her Lily, and she responds, "My mummy was pretty but sad, just like you." Okay, little shit, alright. Marianne shakes off the stray bullet and tells Lily that her parents died when she was little. Sadness responds that she knows what it's like to be alone. She says she knows that she shouldn't be here, presumably referring to Limbo, but she can't leave yet. She says she's scared of the monster, but it doesn't need her anymore.
But it doesn't need me anymore. It wants you. And when it breaks you, when it puts you on, it'll finally be able to leave this place. But it will never be full. It will never stop killing.
Whew, slow down there, Lil. Let's not be rash. Lily backs off and says, "No, Marianne, it's not just about me. It's about you. You have to remember. We remember a dream, a fire, and a red house, and Lily and Marianne being there together. It's not too long before we find the red house ourselves. Out the front door, in the Limbo world at least, we see incinerated bodies of children crammed into coffins. The fire that burned was so severe that the house is still burning in the ghost world, and attempting to enter it causes Marianne real damage. I spent a while trying to get in with the spirit shield, or use a spirit blast on the fire, or find something nearby I could use to put the fire out, but I had no luck. I expected this to be some kind of puzzle, so I really thought about it for a long time. This is the first time in the game I had to Google what the fuck to do. Turns out I needed to pick up a lighter or something off the floor. It's not a puzzle. I do so and we see a cutscene with Thomas in a briefcase. He's talking to Mirror Thomas again, sifting through the briefcase to find a gun, some files, some clothes. There's an ID for the security service. The owner of this briefcase is with the KGB. KGB. The owner of this briefcase walks up behind Thomas and knocks him out. Thomas wakes up tied to a chair. This is now an interrogation. Thomas warns KGB man, Henry, you don't know what you're messing with, but Henry assures Thomas that he is well aware. He has been tracking and studying Thomas for a long time. See, Thomas's abilities got him locked up by the Red Army for years after the war, as they did research to try and discern the foundation of his medium abilities and supernatural powers. Henry smacks on some chain gloves and starts beating the shit out of our boy. Thomas, despite the sheen of sweat on his face, manages to drop a "your mum" joke, and I completely floundered. I didn't know how to respond to that. Henry brings up the topic of Thomas's children, what kind of pain he'd endure to keep them safe. Thomas starts struggling and Henry says, I'll let you go in exchange for information about your powers. Thomas says, enough of this shit, hit me, and Henry obliges. One punch later, he's out like a light. When Thomas wakes up, the house is on fire. Thomas weakly offers to show Henry his power, and Henry obliges. Thomas possesses him. We wake up in Henry's mind now. Unlike Richard's green poison world, Henry's mind is bright red and black, heavily shadowed. It's like a huge library full of towers of overflowing filing cabinet drawers, like Hermaeus Mora's plane of Skyrim, if he worked in the back office of an accountancy firm. Devoid of light and any living creature except one. There's a monster here, something that stalks about in the shadows just out of sight. Sometimes we see it for a moment, this quadrupedal hunter, and it follows Thomas as he explores. Thomas finds an office with a TV in it, and on the TV we can see Henry's inner child, just like Richard. We just need to get to him. We walk into a kitchen full of hanging hunks of meat. There's a bloke here with a torch who scans for Thomas, saying things like, I know you're here, you've been a very bad boy. He shone the torch at me a few times, but it didn't seem to do anything, so I just kept running past him. We learn a few things here in Henry's mind. After Thomas escaped the Red Army, he hid out here in the Niwa Resort and started a family. However, the Secret Service were tipped off as to his location by the appearance of the newly catatonic Richard, now in a vegetative state. Apparently, Thomas would do that to a lot of the doctors who assessed him during his confinement. They'd accidentally make physical contact with him and go into a vegetative state themselves. Apparently, Thomas did it a lot and can do it through skin-to-skin contact in a matter of seconds. Vegetative. Okay, we finally see the creature that has been chasing us, a hellhound, quite literally, the body of a huge, misshapen dog, but the enormous skull of a giant human. Awesome. Thomas arrives at a cell and finds a little boy, Henry's inner child, who says that the monster is looking for him, but as soon as Thomas is inside the cell, he says, there is no child, only me. The cell doors slam shut as the hellhound appears behind him, and Mirror Thomas is trapped in Henry's mind with him. Real Thomas breaks free, running to the house. Lily and Marianne are his daughters, and they're trapped in the fire. Marianne wakes up from her flashback, and Henry's monster is here, still, creeping around. Like Moore, he can take physical form in Limbo, presumably because Henry himself is dead? Is it Henry's ghost? Marianne says throughout the game that a demon can only move on when its host is dead, and Henry is dead, so the demon should have gone, but Henry has no inner child and no spirit, so maybe this is how he appears in Limbo. This demon seems to just be Henry. I think it's implying that this is a man who is true evil, born evil, and I think it's worth remembering the way Richard and his evil was characterized in contrast. I'll talk more about it later in the video, but hold on to this thought. Henry implies that Thomas killed Lily to save her, only to attack Marianne, but she blasts him away with a spirit force and he's dragged into the afterlife. Now she has time and space to think. Marianne has questions. Was Henry the man with the gun from her dream, or Thomas? What happened after the fire? We find a note left by Thomas, worried that one of the girls might kill the other. A bit stark, but it will make sense. We hear Lily saying, I hate her, she took my mum away from me, I wish she was dead. It's all but outright said that Marianne's mother died in childbirth, giving birth to her, and she and Lily were quite close. From what I could gather, Marianne was only 3 years old during the fire, and Lily was much older. I can't tell how much older she was. Was she 13 years old? That's when she was groomed by Richard, but the fire could have happened before or afterwards. Was she 16? Either way, there is an age gap that seems very significant. We find out that Moore was inside Lily's consciousness at the time of the fire, trapped inside her body and mind. However, when the fire broke out, Moore offered Lily an option. Set him free and he would save her from the fire. Lily took the offer, at which point Moore tried to convince her to leave Marianne to die. Marianne didn't die, obviously, but sustained burns so bad that she ended up in a coma. In the meantime, Moore was set free and single-handedly enacted the Niwa massacre. Lily tells Thomas about this. He knows the risks of a demon being let loose, but he can't get Mirror Thomas back. Mirror Thomas was trapped in Henry's world now, despite Henry being dead, in the mind of the Hellhound that remained in Limbo. So all of a sudden his greatest asset is lost to him, and he's helpless without his power. To try and stop the spread of Moore, Thomas sedates Lily heavily and keeps her locked away in a salt-lined bunker. But it isn't helping. By the time Lily is 16, Moore is completely eating away at her from the inside, but it's also outside of her. Maybe it returned to her and repossessed her? I don't quite understand what was being implied here. We head down into the house and find the bunker, or we find some chambers full of water first that we have to arbitrarily shift about to unlock doors and stuff. This is where the gameplay of this game really dips. It was petering on meh up until this point with the stiff stealth sections and the fetch quests, tantamount to just walking into the next room and finding the right item, but it's awful here. We also really lose the visual spectacle of Limbo versus our world. It was the same in Niwa too, but it's really obviously bad here. We need to be walking around in corridors and tunnels, obviously, so the Limbo version of this world is literally identical to the real world, except with some scrappy filter and some rust. The visual spectacles we've seen so far have completely gone, it's just tunnels now. Basically, we need to drain the water from the chamber that holds the entrance to Lily's bunker. To do that, we need to drain a bunch of chambers and open some valves. There was one point where I walked over to where the valve should be, and Marianne commented that the valve handle was missing. I walked to the right and found a locker with a chain on it. I used the bolt cutter to unlock it. The valve handle was in there. I took it back to the valve and used it. 10 seconds of extra time to turn a handle. What's the point of even locking the locker with the chains? Especially since it's right next to the valve itself, it's the most time-wasty puzzle ever. They make no attempt to hide it, and bolt cutters have infinite use, so we'd never be without them. Moore shows up here too for the same hijinks. I was enjoying the story kind of, but gameplay-wise, I really needed this to be done. As mentioned before, the hide-and-seek stuff gets very old very fast. I do quite like stuff like that, and even I was bored of it after a while. This game is very story-focused, so these long drawn-out sequences where the Moore just says stuff over and over is frustrating. Plus, you realise that once he catches you, you go right back to an autosave a few seconds prior, so there are no stakes. Every time he caught me, I would just trial and error the rest of the sequence. It's hard to keep immersion with stuff like that. We learn that the soul can split itself into two after near-death experiences or highly traumatic events to mitigate trauma. The two sides can be completely different people or even hate each other. Presumably it's talking about Sadness and Lily. Finally, we enter the bunker. We find a broken mirror and put the pieces together, only for Mirror Thomas to come crashing through it into Limbo. Turns out that by banishing the Hellhound to the afterlife, we set Mirror Thomas free, and from what I could gather looking online, it seems to be after about 29 years of imprisonment. He's happy to see Marianne and he asks her to explain what's going on. We see the scene we've seen previously where Marianne is talking to the invisible party. He's not invisible, he's just in limbo. It was Mirror Thomas all along. Thomas explains that Lily was locked away in a cell after becoming unstable. Apparently she's a powerful medium and her powers are much stronger than Marianne's and much more dangerous. Thomas explains when Richard hurt her, it awoke something inside her and it's only a matter of time before it got out. Their reunion comes to an end when Moore finds them, creeping through the bunker towards them. Mirror Thomas stops to take Marianne by the shoulders and say, "You can't always save everyone, Butterfly. Trust me, I know." Marianne runs and Mirror Thomas presumably dies. We walk outside and find a clearing. It's the woods from the dream at the start of the game. As we approach that fateful pier, we see a figure standing at the end of it staring out onto the lake. It's cool, in the Limbo version of this place, the lake is just a huge, endless cavern beneath them. I like it. At least we got a good scene visually to send us off with. The figure is Lily, obviously. She looks extremely pale, with hair flecked with grey, and haggard eyes and beaten up clothes. "You finally made it," she says, looking utterly broken. It was at this point that I realised that they were each wearing half of a butterfly necklace. Very subtle stuff. They greet each other as sisters and Lily remarks, "At least you had a life for a while," implying I won't anymore. Lily recounts the fire and the Niwa massacre and says, "Because I lived, so did my demons." Marianne asked if Thomas had tried to kill Lily and Lily said, "No, but maybe he should have. He only delayed the inevitable." Lily's arms and thighs are covered in layers of bandages, implying a significant amount of self-harm. She admits she tried to take her own life multiple times, but the Moore won't let her. She tells Marianne that she's the only one who can fix things. Lily has a gun, and she hands it to Marianne. Lily knows that you can't send the demon away while the host is still alive, which is why Moore can't be destroyed and why Sadness can't pass on. Moore finally appears, striding out of the forest. We finally see its real form, this ghastly stitching together of parts. The bottom half of the face is completely torn away. The shoulders and upper body are oddly feminine, but shredded and skinned, potentially to symbolise how Lily felt about her own body after her assault. I don't think it's a coincidence that Moore's lips, breasts and thighs are all sliced up. Its torso looks rotten from the inside as well. As it comes closer, Marianne puts a gun to her head, threatening to kill herself and deprive Moore of a new vessel. Moore has no poker face. It immediately panics, which just made me think, why can't they leave? Why can't they close Niwa off? The Moore can't seem to leave Niwa or go a certain distance from Lily, so at the very least, can't they lock it away for the rest of Lily's natural-born life? What's more is that the Moore is hungry, and the panic implies it might eventually waste away if it goes without a proper proper host? Why is the first instinct to kill Lily? Lily pushes Marianne to kill her as the mole leers from a distance. Marianne aims the gun at her own head, then holds her head in her hands in despair. We hear Thomas, "You can't save everyone, Marianne." The screen cuts to black and we hear a gunshot. So, discussion time. I've got a few topics I want to cover, but most importantly, I want to start with Richard. Richard and the Childeater. So, as we know, Richard took Thomas in after Thomas's escape from the Red Army and gave him a home and a place on the Niwa Resort, where he met his wife and had his children. Lily, the oldest, became the fixation of Richard's obsession, and it's implied that a demon within Richard forced him to abuse her. Richard, to me, represents determinism. Determinism, in a nutshell, is a nurture over nature theory of human behaviour. The idea that every single choice you ever make, every reaction you ever have, every action you take, has been predetermined by a domino effect of external factors. Let me give you an example. Let's say when you were growing up, your parents screamed at you as a form of discipline. They saw behaviour they didn't like, so they'd scream at you, you wouldn't argue back, you would learn. But as you grow up, you might subconsciously find getting shouted at very confusing and frustrating. Your boss or your partner screaming at you will make you uncomfortable, scared, and angry, but you were conditioned as a child to see this as your fault and something you need to rectify with your behaviour, and something you don't have the right to argue back about. Who knows where your parents learned it from? Your parents would have picked this up from something else as well. So, for example, one day your partner finds you've spilled some water on the kitchen floor and they get wet socks. They scream at you. It's completely unacceptable for any adults to scream at you. You should be angry. You should tell them to fuck off. You shouldn't tolerate that behaviour. You shouldn't be with them if they don't respect you. But that conditioning from back when you were a kid overrides any reason. You cower, you freeze, you fawn. You might cry, you might try and diffuse the situation, you might try and lighten the situation. You might apologise, why not? You've been taught that it's your fault when you are screamed at. Your brain hates it and it knows that. To stop it, it needs to learn. So from now on, you make extra sure to clean up any puddles of water on the floor, and every time you hear them walk into the kitchen, there's a part of you that tenses up with panic. Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, whatever you face, your fear response was likely chosen for you a long time ago. And being that it's an impulse, a subconscious act automated by your nervous system, you have little to no say in it. It's not your fault. Can you even truly relearn your own fear response? Can you genuinely change it? In some ways, I quite appreciate determinism. When looking back on confrontations or moments of panic or difficult times we faced, it's nice to examine how we reacted and why we reacted that way. Being able to sift through your unconscious reactions, I think, is really healthy. It's a good way to take the blame off yourself for something you couldn't control or give yourself a break. Someone mugged you and you just froze up or handed over your wallet without a word. A vile co-worker made a demand off you and you just awkwardly laughed and acquiesced. It's a fear response. There's no need to beat yourself up for it. It can be very cathartic to give yourself a break. However, where determinism loses me is when it's used to justify actions, not reactions. A lot of determinist thinking exercises look at some of the most evil figures in our known history. Hitler is a really common example of a determinist thought exercise. People take some of the decisions he made in the decades leading up to the Holocaust and they look back over his history, over his mother's history, over his doctor's history, and find external factors that would influence his decision making. If you can work backwards on everything someone has ever done and find a cause and effect for every action they take, you can effectively rid somebody of blame. But in my opinion, an action, an active choice, can't be given the same deterministic grace as a reaction. Reactions are subconscious, they're out of our control, especially when fueled by fear. Actions are active decisions. There's plenty of time for second guesses, for external moral choices, for critical thought. You can usually even roll it back, apologise and fix your mistakes as much as you can. Probably not in Hitler's case, but more generally, yeah. This is what the Childeater represents to me. Richard claims that he was powerless and helpless, that something inside him forced him to act that way, and that he was an unwilling, self-hating passenger who was dragged along for every second of the ride, a prisoner in his own body and mind. Not that determinism means you become an unwilling passenger and a puppet of fate, but it's more the symbolism of what it means to essentially be locked into your own fate by decisions made across your entire family tree and the family trees of every person that's ever influenced you. Richard's sad backstory triggered this chain reaction of cause and effect, and the Childeater grew within him like a cancer until it had control of his actions while he was conscious and trapped inside, watching in horror. Even though the characters tell Richard that this changes nothing, the game still makes a point to show it and suggests that his actions weren't his own, if not outright saying that his actions were not his own. The game tells us that there is a good person and a good spirit trapped in a body that is being puppeted by a paedophilic demon? Yeah. It separates Richard from his impulses and claims that they are the result of possession, out of his control, determined by something that happened in his past, and therefore in his mother's past and his stepfather's past, that forced him to actively abuse a little girl. Not reactively, not an in-the-moment outburst of fear, a campaign of abuse long enough to fill a sketchbook. In The Medium, Richard is portrayed as a victim of fate. An examination of sin through the lens of determinism, using demons as a symbol of that domino effect, could actually be really interesting. I'm not opposed to the idea. Using a narrative to examine that, giving cause and effect physical form as demons, is a curious idea. Giving a protagonist or antagonist a demon that grows with every piece of external stimuli until it basically takes control of them could be a good examination. Except, The Medium contradicts itself. So, let's talk about Henry. As we know, Henry is a ruthless KGB agent. He's not afraid to kill children, not quickly and quietly either. He sets their house on fire knowing they will die in agony inside it. In one interrogation scene, it's implied he arrests and brutally interrogates a member of his own family. He knows exactly how to torture people, extracting information in a vile, nasty way. And as we learn from our examination of his mind, he is a demon. Unlike Richard, there is no inner child. There's no cancer that takes root following a traumatic event and grows as a response to external factors outside of Henry's control. There probably never was an inner child. Henry's soul has always been the Hellhound. He was born a demon in human skin. He is fundamentally evil, right down to his core, and nothing can fix that. Henry proves to us that some people in this world simply lack a proper soul. They are just evil. Henry shows us that these demons can take root in souls from the very beginning, to the point where their actions are just completely intertwined. You can't separate the demon from the person, they're the same thing. But if Henry, the KGB agent, is a monster, that's not determinist. That's nature before nurture. He's always been a monster, regardless of external factors. So why is Richard, the unwilling victim of a cancerous demon, forced to watch his body act without his consent? Why does the game give him that grace to let us understand what horrible turn of events forced him to become this, while Henry is just a monster? Henry is an active evil. Richard is a victim of predestination. Both of them will do what the demon inside wants, but one of them is freely acting of their own will, and the other is passively imprisoned for the ride. Both are reflections of the demon within them. Henry is damned by the game and given no sympathetic portrayal. In Richard's case, we see a string of traumatic events that essentially forced him to become somebody he didn't want to be, and then literally possessed him to assault a little girl. Why are the portrayals so opposite? And then we've got Lily. Lily manifests the Moor. However, the Moor's actions are completely independent of Lily. The Moor grew and lived in Lily's mind following her abuse, talking to her from inside her head. When it saw its opportunity to escape, it manipulated her, and when she gave in, it escaped and ran amok in the Niwa Resort, killing everybody there. Even before it left her mind, it didn't force her hand or possess her. The Moor acted as a manipulative voice in her mind, but it didn't control her actions like the Childeater. Yet, Lily is treated as far more dangerous and far less redeemable than the Hellhound or the Childeater. Unlike the Hellhound or the Childeater, Lily has a measurable death toll. The game never tells us how many children Richard abused. It's implied that it was only Lily. Nor does it tell us how many people Henry killed, only that he tried to kill the two girls. But Lily's death toll is painted on the walls of the Niwa Resort in blood. In the determinist lens of the Childeater, the Moor is the effect caused by Richard's abuse. But it's independent of Lily in so many ways. Richard's trauma created Lily's trauma, but Lily hasn't actually ever done anything. She's completely passive throughout the entire story. She is only ever acted upon, but she creates the most dangerous demon of all of them. No events lead up to her trauma, and she causes no trauma either. She hides away in her salt-lined bunker and waits out the rest of her days while the Moor, a being she can't control or reason with, kills indiscriminately. My first question was, why would Lily's trauma spawn an evil entity? Henry's evil from the bottom up, and Richard's obsession with children is born from the death of his childhood sweetheart. A reference to Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov, by the way, a book I have never heard of and definitely never ever read, so their demons make sense given the context. But Lily, why is the Moor hungry and desperate to possess people? The Moor literally means the jaws or throat of a voracious animal, or the gullet of a greedy person. So the name does make sense, it does suit the demon. But what about abuse trauma equates to greed? Why did they characterize the Moor like this? Her trauma is from being abused. Surely a more contextually appropriate demon would chase her, waiting at the door of her salt-lined bunker, stalking her. It could represent trauma she hasn't come to terms with and worked through herself, haunting her, waiting for any opportunity to kill her. Why would it harm other people? If you imagined a creature creature that was the living embodiment of post-abuse trauma, would you really imagine something like the Maw? When we meet Lily at the end of the game, she tells us that the only way to stop the monster is to kill her. She's the host, an anchor keeping the Maw on Earth. But is that true? Henry died almost 30 years ago, but his Hellhound is still roaming in limbo. Is that because the Hellhound is his spirit? But it could mean that the Maw would stay even if Lily died. What's more is that when Marianne holds the gun to her own head, the Maw panicked. Is it because he's wasting away, getting weaker? Could he eventually just crumble to pieces like Sadness has? Secondly, the Maw hasn't left the Niwa Resort in the decades since it was released, which implies that it only has a small circle it can be active within. This implies that it can't go far away from its host, Lily. I feel like alongside the family's inability to help her cope in a healthy way, this assumption that her only option is death is short-sighted. They've had decades to think about this. She tells us that she's wanted to kill herself many times, but she's not strong enough, which is a tired trope. I feel like often in media, failing to follow through on suicide is considered cowardly, like you're lacking the courage and strength to end it all. It's dumb, in my opinion, because I guess it does take a certain kind of strength to kill yourself, but it also takes more strength to carry on when you genuinely don't see a future. It's a cheap line that I hear so much, and it's boring, and it's insensitive. Like, suicide is the best thing Lily can offer the world? Like, her life should just immediately end as she's so irredeemable that her mere continued existence is a genuine burden to those around her? It's not, by the way, if you ever find yourself thinking that. You are not a burden. Anyway, the overarching theme of this narrative is trauma creates trauma. Richard's trauma created Lily's trauma, and his demon created her demon, which is now running rampant, presumably to create more trauma. It's strange. Richard gets a lot of grace in this story. The characters might damn him for what he's done and tell him the context of his life doesn't matter, but then why does the game go to the effort of showing it? Why not just have him feebly blurt out the story to Thomas when he's getting beaten up? Why not have him in the interrogation chair? We're made to play as Richard with the in-game objective of freeing him from his demons. He is given sympathy by the game, even if the characters damn him for what he does. Richard is given what culminates as an excuse for his paedophilia. He, as a person, is innocent according to the game, but the demon made him do it. He had no control. While Henry is never given an excuse, he's also never seen to actually harm anyone. The Hellhound is never confirmed to kill anybody on or off screen. Henry never has blood on his hands in the story. He even speaks to Marianne in a kind of professional way. He just answers her questions and then she sends him to the afterlife. Business is business. Yet, Lily is ground zero for a supernatural massacre. What's more, it is an undefeatable supernatural massacre, with a lingering horror that murders anyone who sets foot on the grounds. According to the game, while Lily is alive, the Maw is alive, making her a lost cause, a piece of necessary collateral. You can't save everyone, the game says. I would offer the gameplay a bit more leeway if not for Bloober's existing track record. In Bloober's The Blair Witch game, you play as Ellis, an ex-soldier whose post-traumatic stress disorder is so extreme that it causes him to become a child murderer. As the game wears on, we find out that there's only one way to stop this cycle. Ellis has to die because his trauma is dangerous to everybody else around him. According to the Blair Witch, he can't heal from his PTSD, and his PTSD is so severe that it makes him a danger to everybody around him, so the only answer is for him to die. There's no alternative, it's the same as the medium. Once you're broken by your experiences, according to these games, you're an unfixable lost cause, and the only answer is death. As we stand on the pier in our final moments of the game, watching Marianne choose between shooting Lily or herself, the game emphasizes, you can't save everyone. The cycle of trauma can only be ended with Lily's death. But who does Marianne shoot? The game does suggest that Marianne could kill herself, but why would that work? The Maw would still exist in the form it took before Marianne arrived at Niwa. She won't cause it to die, it will continue to terrorize Lily and kill whoever steps onto the grounds. I saw people suggest that Lily saw herself as irredeemable and wanted to die, but Marianne saw the good in her and wanted to save her, so she killed herself in that final moment. But there's no indication whatsoever that it would actually help Lily. Marianne has been led out here and now, backed into a corner by the Maw. Lily's trauma means that she has to choose between killing Lily or giving her entire life for even a chance to save her. Lily's trauma becomes the ultimate burden for Marianne. Not only would Marianne shooting herself equate to absolutely zero impact of herself being at Niwa in the first place, being that she would achieve nothing and furthermore lose everything. She'd lose herself, her own life, and her newly found family. Lily's trauma would be the direct cause for her sister's death, mirror Thomas's death, and implied but not confirmed, her father's death. Not to mention the deaths of everybody who died in the Niwa massacre. If Marianne does kill herself in the end to give her sister a chance, what does that tell us? That the trauma of this victim is a burden her family needs to carry for her? That for an abuse survivor to even begin living a normal life, she needs to lose her entire family or have her entire family sacrifice everything? That the trauma of an abuse survivor is strong enough to rip apart everybody they love. Lily's not fixed and not better if Marianne dies. If Lily dies, the game tells us that the situation is more likely to resolve. I think, all things considered, after all this writing, 32 pages in, that the medium wrote itself into a corner by creating the Maw and tying it so closely to Lily, and then trying to give a definitive answer on both how Lily needs to fix it and how the laws of the world they're in work. Because this ending screams of, we wrote ourselves into a corner and now we need to answer it. And that's really where the story falls apart, by giving you the solution to a trauma that they've not had the sensitivity to portray well. Because trauma can be done well, and it doesn't always have to be a happy ending. Let me introduce you to Angela Orosco. Angela Orosco is a side character in Silent Hill 2. We meet her early on in the game, having come to Silent Hill around the same time as James, who's there to atone for his own past transgressions. Angela was a 19-year-old girl who was sexually abused by her father and brother. As a result, she's terrified of men and physically recoils whenever James touches her, assuming he wants something sexual from her, like all the other men in her life have. She's extremely distrustful and quick to go on the defensive. The second she feels cornered, she panics like a trapped fox, and occasionally even gets aggressive, but underneath it all, she is just terrified of ever being in that situation again. During her time in Silent Hill 2, you meet her a couple of times. During one of those times, you help her fight her trauma, the abstract daddy, a fleshy figure modelled after a bed with two figures on top. One is trapped underneath, struggling, and one is on top. It's a very, very on-the-nose piece of imagery, and it's Angela's trauma manifest. You best the creature. Trauma fixed, right? Not so. You find Angela later on in the Lakeview Hotel on a burning staircase. James remarks on the flames and Angela says, "Oh, you see it too? That's how it always looks for me." She sarcastically asks James if he's going to help her, and he just looks at his feet. Angela walks up the stairs and dies off screen. She's done fighting, and James doesn't stop her when she goes. James knows that if he saved Angela, dragging her back downstairs, she'd still be in Silent Hill, surrounded by monsters, having to fight when she honestly just can't anymore. Not only that, but he'd have to basically strap her to him, knowing her intense fear of men, and also knowing that he might die and leave her alone again. He's still got to find Mary, he's fighting for his own life. He doesn't have this extra space. He's done what he can, and he lets her go in that final moment. She wants to go, and he doesn't stop her. You can judge him for that. I remember judging him pretty hard for it, but I also acknowledge that I wasn't living his life and this crazy hypothetical scenario. Would I be too tired to shoulder Angela's will to live alongside my own? Would I let her go? I played Silent Hill 2 for the first time about a decade ago, and sometimes I still think about it. What was the right action? Was anything the right action? Silent Hill, unlike the medium, doesn't make definitive statements about how to deal with trauma, or even why. The message of Silent Hill, to me, has always been, you can deal with your trauma now, or you can deal with your trauma later, but eventually you will have to deal with it. Silent Hill tells us that our past never leaves us. It will follow us until we come to terms with it. You can do that on your own terms in therapy, or you can get dragged into a foggy hell and forced to physically overcome it, and then physically overcome it in 2 hours or less, and then physically overcome it in hard mode, and then physically overcome it with a 10-star rating. There are multiple endings to Silent Hill 2. The first is called Leave. It's our acceptance ending, where James collects Laura, a little girl he met on his travels in this horrible town, and takes her away from Silent Hill as he himself leaves healed. There's Rebirth, our denial ending, where James rows Mary's corpse across the lake, intending to resurrect her. There's Maria, our bargaining ending, where James decides to focus on a new woman rather than come to terms with the death of an old woman. He drives Maria away from Silent Hill only for her to begin coughing like Mary did, and the cycle begins anew. And finally, there's In Water, our depression ending, where James drives his car into Toluca Lake. James' final ending directly parallels Angela's choice to walk up into the fire as he drives down into the cold waters of Toluca Lake. But as long as you face your trauma, that's all Silent Hill cares about. Unlike the medium, Silent Hill isn't about who you can save. It's not about saving anybody. You don't even have to save yourself. It's about having the courage to look your past in the eye before you beat it to death with a gold pipe you got from a 2D mermaid in a sewer. Healing horror is a possible genre. If you don't believe Silent Hill is healing horror, just look at the Babadook. Rule of Rose also, in a way. Not everything has to have a happy ending, not every story has to end well, but it is possible for healing to take place and for something to still be scary. So, time for some final thoughts. I thought about this game for a while as I was playing it. If the rest of this video wasn't an indication, I think often game developers get a lot of free brownie points when they make games about mental health and trauma. Smack some dark themes into a game and people will defend it it forever for raising awareness or tackling difficult subjects, no matter how well it's done. I saw this a lot in the comments on my Rachel Foster video. You can smack a bit of grooming into a game and you'll have people flocking over to tell you how it's raising awareness of mental health, no matter how badly it's handled, or it's just showing a different perspective, or it's just casting light on specific behaviour. Maybe it tried to, yeah, but it's appallingly written and an insult to play, so we'll have to agree to disagree. The same goes for Martha is Dead. Have your character gratuitously carve her own wrist open on screen in first person, then just smack a suicide hotline up before the credits roll and all will be forgiven. Why? People don't claim that Hotline Miami raises awareness of gun crime. Hatred doesn't raise awareness of school shooters. Call of Duty Modern Warfare doesn't raise awareness of war crime. Grand Theft Auto doesn't raise awareness of vehicular theft. It's a cop-out of any due criticism levelled at a story, and a lazy one at that. Presentation matters. Suicide, self-harm, rape, paedophilia, they're presented in many games, books and films, and it is possible to do it right, in a way that's sensitive and presented well, but still scary and haunting and stays with you. You don't have to plaster the words "paedophiles are bad" on screen in full capital letters. You just need to treat the victims with a bit of respect, a voice, a sprinkle of agency, a story that doesn't imply they need to die for things to be good again. I often get accused of wanting games like this to be banned, and I don't. If this kind of art is really what you want to produce, go ahead. But you can't just smack a character in, give them PTSD, and get free points for raising awareness, especially when said trauma is graphically misrepresented for shock value or to make a moral point. The second you address that, you get people telling you that the story was actually intentionally bad. It was a secret horror you clearly don't understand. It's supposed to make you annoyed. It's supposed to be a representation on how victim blaming works. You're supposed to learn from the game, silly. No matter what, games that stamp suicide and PTSD on themselves like badges of honor always have this halo of invulnerability when it comes to criticism. Oh no, you can't criticize them because they're raising awareness. Oh no, you can't criticize them because they're purposefully really badly written to show you an extreme. Oh no, you can't criticize them because it's exactly what the developers want and you fell for it. The medium is a good game as well, at least for the first portion. Interesting puzzles, incredible visual design, brilliant atmosphere. Then we hit the tunnels below the house and it's nothing but small corridors with uninspired visual design and boring, simple puzzles. It must have only taken me an hour or so, but it felt like days. I had to put the game down and just go and do something else because I was so bored. The whole time being drip-fed a story that was initially absolutely entrancing. I couldn't stop thinking about where it would go. My first red flag was the paedophile garden section, compounded by the strange contradictory logic of Henry's Hellhound, but it didn't really hammer home until those final few scenes. The reveal of Lily, the origin of Moore, and the one single solution to all that trauma. I think the medium went in with the best of intentions, I really do, but the best of intentions isn't always enough. Casting judgment, alleviating blame of one person but casting it on others, and putting undue blame on victims isn't raising awareness nor telling a story to show you how bad it is. It's just a bad story that bites off more than it can chew. And you know what else might be biting off more than you can chew? Remaking Silent Hill 2, the very game you dropped the ball with hard just trying to copy. Thanks for watching. This was a long one, probably the longest one I've ever done, and if you're still here, well done. Christ, we made it. I hope you enjoyed it at least, I hope you had fun, and I hope you found some of it interesting. Honestly, thank you for being here. If you enjoyed it, please like the video, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to me here on YouTube. I post gaming content as often as I can, so if that appeals to you, don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss another upload from me. Finally, thank you again to my patrons, and if you'd like to come chat all things gaming in real time, catch me over at twitch.tv/merkkk, live at 7 PM UK time every other day. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.
It's hot as hell in here.
You see it too. For me, it's always like this.